So Canada Soccer has released a 24-player roster for the women's camp and friendly versus France coming up in April. Let's talk about it. Alright, so guys, welcome back to the Africans. It feels like all the time we talk, we're talking about the women here. Don't worry, men qualified Nation League semis, and we got the Gold Cup coming up for them in the summer. But women got a World Cup coming. We gotta give them a little bit of love, more love than we always do, or the love they deserve, depending on who you're asking. If you're new, again, we do primarily Canadian African content because we won't be the Africans if we didn't do so. So Canada's dropped their roster, and let's kind of go through this. Let's start from the bottom to the top. We got Sabrina D'Angelo back, Lizzie Ann Prue from goalkeepers, and Kayleen Sheridan. In the defensive line, we have Kadisha Buchanan, Vanessa Gilles, Sydney Collins, Jade Rose, Surayeka, Alicia Chapman, Gabby Carl, Ashley Lawrence, Jade Riviere, Bianca St. George's. In the midfield, we have Quinn, Simia Wujo, Jessie Fleming, Julia Grosso, and Sophie Schmidt. In the forwards, we have Amanda Allen, Jordan Heitema, Chloe Lacasse, Clarissa Larcy, Christine Sinclair, Adrienne Leon, and Evelyn Vienne. Now, a few interesting things on this roster that at least I found interesting. Christine Sinclair is back to being listed as a forward, though last year she was listed as a midfielder, which does make me wonder in terms of what is Bev thinking in terms of formations, players that she could have. Now, she did mention she wanted to only have one game for the April window and just really have a lot of just practice and training time with the players. So I think that's fine. I would have loved to see them play another game just because then you can really test, or maybe they may have a game behind closed doors that we may not hear about or not be able to see. The midfield only showing as 5 players is interesting. Only having Quinn, Simia Wujo, Jessie Fleming, Julia Grosso, and Sophie Schmidt. And there's a lot of players who may come down to the wire, which makes it very interesting. Right? We have players who are missing this camp. Michelle Prince still recovering, and to kind of mention all those, Prince, Scott, as well as Deanne Rose are players that Bev Priestman has said that she's gonna try to wait. It's gonna be close to the vest, close to the wire to get them in, and they'll have to reevaluate when they get closer to the tournament. So with those 3 players maybe not there. Also of note, Zelina Zadorsky, not in this camp, dealing with a bit of a knock. There's a little bit of an opportunity with players to be able to come in and maybe perform and see. I'm very curious. Typically, I would have looked at this and said, let's look at the forwards. Clarissa Larcy, can she be winger number 4 and really be able to provide some support? But with all things, let's go back to the beginning. With all things, when you start to glean from the roster, what does that tell you? A lack of midfielders makes me think a 2-man midfield or a 2-player midfield may be what Bev is thinking, which is an interesting choice. We've gone through, for the most part, we've experimenting with that 4-2-3-1. Maybe Bev wants to experiment with a 4-4-2, especially when you're looking at the players that are there, right? If you're going to play a player like Christine Sinclair as a forward, she's not the striker she used to be. Age comes for us all. So maybe she's more of that second striker. So maybe that looks more like a 4-5-1 versus like a traditional 4-4-2. Maybe she tries to experiment with a 3-4-3. It is possible. But a lot of this just feels like you're going to have 2 forwards. Now, can she still play a 4-3-3 or a 4-2-3-1? She can. She can play with either 2 holdings with that 4-2-3-1, and then just have the 2 holdings there and then have Sinclair up top with your attackers. In that case, you essentially have, it's really a 4-2-2-2, essentially, where you have 2 strikers but then 1 underneath, and then the wingers or the wing forwards in that sense playing there. So that could be very interesting in terms of how Bev is thinking of the setup. But this with 5 midfielders, and we do have other midfielders we could have called up, I feel, but I feel like Bev is only looking at these as the midfielders that she wants to bring in, and it does make it interesting. But again, a 2-player midfield may be what Bev leans towards, but then maybe occupying the midfield with more, similar to what Herdman does with the men. A 3-5-2 over this past window where it allows you to have your wing forwards or your wing backs actually pinch in a little bit to help support, but then also give them some freedom of movement. That might be an interesting thing that Bev is looking at. 2-player midfield, that's what it feels like for the women. When you look at the back line, welcome back Jade Rose, and welcome back Jade Riviere. We've missed you. And it'll be interesting to see how she's eased into this. Probably more training than anything, but I expect to see Jade play at least a half against France. With that being said, you're looking at the back line, and I was thinking about this. How many spots are available? And that's the interesting question, right? This is a 24-player roster. There's 4 players that are missing already who would make it under other circumstances. So how many spots are really available? When we look at the goalkeepers, D'Angelo, Prue, and then Sheridan were there. That's not moving, bearing an injury. When we're looking at the center backs, you have Kadisha, you have Vanessa, you have Jade Rose, and assuming that she'll be fit, Shalina Zadorsky. Those are your 4 fullbacks. So then you're looking at flexibility, fluidity, players who can move around. Who does Bev see as that? Right? And this is where I think I get into a conversation where a player like Sydney Carl, Surayeka, and then Sydney Collins, who was there as a training player. She was the only Canadian drafted in the NWSL. There as a training player. I think those 3 may be battling for one spot. Because the absence of a Janine Becky means you can't just have a player who can fill in multiple spots. You may need to find a player who can either at least do 2 of those things. So Carl, who can play center back and a fullback, right? Bianca St. George, who's done it a little bit, but maybe is stronger as that fullback position. And without Becky playing in the fullback role, you'd probably want a player like that who can come in and be solid. So when we're looking at the fullbacks, and even adding a Jade Rose in that conversation, we saw Bev play her out wide in a 3 in the back system, but then also in a 2 center backs, in a 4 at the back system, where she either played out wide as right with Ashley Lawrence or not. So it'll be interesting to see what Bev wants to experiment with. But when we're looking at just the fullback options, right? Yeka can play out there. Alicia Chapman, probably closer to on the roster than not. Gabby Carl, Jade Rivera, and then Bianca St. George's. You're looking at, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? 6 players who can play either center back and or fullback. 3 to 4 of them are in, right? Riviere is definitely in. Lawrence is in, and I think Chapman is in. And then you have Carl, St. George's, and Yeka. How many spots are actually available there? That will be interesting to watch. When we get to the forwards, Amanda Allen, I will continue to say, I think is my sleeper pick to make this roster. I think Simi makes it now just because you need a little bit more in the midfield. And then when it comes to actually players going back to the back line, can any of those center backs step up into a CDM role? Because if they can, and I know Jade Rose might be the best option for that, and then you rotate your back to center backs between Zadorsky, Gilles, and Buchanan. If you advance a Jade Rose as a CDM type, especially if Desi isn't ready, you have the option that you can shift between a back 3 and a back 4, where you can have Jade sink into the middle between both Buchanan and Gilles, and that would be interesting. And then that can allow both Jade and Ashley Lawrence to move further up the pitch. So instead of having like a traditional 4-5-2, that can become a little bit of a 3-4-3, where then you can move players and they can find spots, or a 3-4-1-2, right? And I think a 3-4-1-2, interestingly, could be the answer, and could be curiously what we're looking at here, where then you can play, though technically she is seen as a forward in this lineup, you can play Sinclair as that false 9, that 10, where I think that role suits her best right now at this point of her career. And then you have your 2 forwards. Now, I've not always been the fan of having forwards who maybe profile better as wingers. I know, and you don't have those options very much moving, right? If you play right now, you're starting wingers in a traditional 3-4-3 or a 4-2-3-1 would be Chloe Lacasse and Adriana Leon. Those are your healthy wingers, right? And then if you're going to play a striker there, you're either going Evelyn Vienne or you're going Christine Sinclair, maybe, or Jordan Heidema, maybe. So that does create a little bit of what we maybe might see. But I think Amanda Allen could be interesting as just adding a little bit more life and pace on the wings. I think a lot of what, in terms of ball movement and just getting attacks going, you need pace on there. If not pace, you need players who can make quick decisions and who have good visibility. That's something actually on a low key I've liked Heidema on the wing. I don't think I'd like her as a wing permanently, but in some matchups, you could see them get away with it. A lot of their World Cup roster is going to come down to health, but I think with the injury to Janine Becky, I think Clarissa Laracy has more of a foot in this roster than a foot out. But now the question comes, can you find another player maybe you can add something on this roster? And I think Amanda Allen might be the player who can push through. I think you're looking at a 2-player midfield or some variation of midfield and help. And I think that 3-4-1-2, that might be the answer now that I say it and I continue to go through. But the roster is here. 25 players are here. Other questions I'm wondering about, are any of the players, especially Deanne, is she at risk? Not Deanne, I think, is the closest, actually, of the players who are injured to be coming back. We've seen her return to a training with her club. So I think Deanne probably makes this. And if Deanne's not ready, I think Amanda Allen's a closer shoo-in to make this roster. But when it comes to just other players, where can you... That's actually interesting. Another interesting factoid and note is that Canada is going to be playing France on April the 11th. In France, Amanda Allen's on this roster, but then the U20s for the women are happening and they start April 14th. So then is Amanda not going to make the roster for the U20s? Or is she going to be on the roster and arrive late? That might be something to watch, because I would assume Amanda makes the U20 roster as part of some of the outstanding U17s who jumped up and had some time with the national team. So between her, Ella Otti, Annabelle Chukwu, I think that'd be hard pressed. But with her being on this roster, maybe they're trying to prioritize her for the national team. We'll see. But that is definitely something to keep an eye on. Sydney Collins, Gabby Carl, Bianca St. George's, are they all battling for one position? Does this midfield window tell you that maybe, for me, it says you're probably going to play a lot of 2-player midfield? So either a 3-4-3, a 3-4-1-2, a 4-4-2 could be the answer here, where then we can drop some of the forwards a little bit closer in line. And I think that could be a bit beneficial as well, so that way you can play and experiment with 2 strikers. I'd love to see Sinclair and Evelyn Vienne pairing, with Evelyn Vienne up top and Sinclair as that second striker. And then on your midfield wings, let's actually build this out here. A 4-4-2 based off the roster that we have here. I would go with, again, Vienne and Sinclair as they're listed. And then on the midfield, right and left, you put Lacasse and Leon. Those two being able to both enter in, cut inside if they need to, or stay on the wings for defensive width. That gives you Sinclair, who can drop back, so you can go from a 4-4-2 to a 4-5-1. Midfield, Jessie and Julia. I don't think there's much question here. Health-wise, I'd assume that Jade isn't ready to go a full 90. So I would assume Jade gets maybe a 45 to 50, maybe max 60 minutes and a lot of training. But then you're back 4 of Lawrence, Buchanan, Gilles, and then let's just go under the assumption that we're going to start Chapman and then bring on Jade in the second half. And then Kayleen Sheridan as the goalkeeper. Would I start Sabrina D'Angelo versus France? I mean, it'd be nice to see her get some top games. I know she wasn't able to finish the game against Japan, but yeah, why not have her play against France? And that'd be a good test for her. But that's how I would set them up in a 4-4-2. If I was gonna try to set them up in a 3-4-1-2, I would go for a back 3 of Rose, Buchanan, and Gilles. Probably Rose in the middle, allowing her to roam up and switch that around. Midfield again, Julia and Jessie. Wingbacks, I would go again with Chapman as well as Lawrence. The one would be Sinclair. Then up top, I'd put Leon and Vienne. And that's how I'd set up in a 3-4-1-2. But guys, I think I'm done rambling here. You guys, let me know, how do you feel about this? What would you set up this team based off the roster you have? And I'm going to stop rambling for now.